I wanted to talk about the Tommy Robinson March in London because that is phenomenal. I'm going to load up a video here. It'll take me a minute to get to. But Carly, you and I both experienced the pro-Palestine rallies in London shortly after the October 7th attacks a couple of years ago. We were in London for the launch of the Ark in London. Yeah. And I went there with Rukshan. He was covering it, and he did a great job. And we weren't necessarily recognized there, and he was able to sort of fit in. And that was a really interesting day watching that unfold. And that was a massive crowd. You and actually my wife and my daughter, who was in London with me, got caught at the other end of the march, and it was a long way away. It was a very, very large crowd of people. There were reports of 100,000 people, and I could believe that. But I'm just going to play this video because this is some aerial footage. And what I want you to do is, number one, notice how many people you can see, but also realize when the crowd spears off to the sides and how many people you still can't see in those directions as well. And just have a think about just the sheer scale of this event and how long this shot goes on and on and on for. And, those people aren't packed shoulder to shoulder, but they're pretty well packed in. And this shot just continues. And if you know London, I don't know exactly where this is, but we'll get to an iconic building that I do recognize. I can't remember the name of the street, but I do know roughly where this happened in London. Those aren't narrow streets. Those are pretty decent boulevards in London, and it just keeps going down and down and down. And obviously, there aren't any sort of side streets through that section there. But as we get here, you'll see a side street with not many people in it, but then we're going to get to a large junction, and it just keeps going. The density now is really high. People really are packed shoulder to shoulder now. I think we're getting closer to the front of the march here. All the way under these trees, it just keeps going and going. And you just watch and just think about how many people we've just seen. So there's that side street with not many people. I think that goes into a building. That's why there's not many people there. But now watch it zoom out, right? And this crowd goes back behind buildings in every direction and behind, down streets in every single direction. And that's pretty much the end of the video. We don't know how much further does it go in any one of those directions. Now, this has been reported as 100,000 people. That strikes me as a pretty light number.
Oh, look, I mean, that's classic mainstream media, but I want to bring up Piers Morgan because he's been wrong on every take, yet still tries to center himself in the conversation as like a moderate. I think Piers Morgan was saying that, this is 100,000 at most. Well, right. The wonderful thing about social media and independent media, like obviously people in the comments are saying Avi and Rukshan are there, is that you can only get away with these lies for so long. Anyone that was within the vicinity of that march would have seen these people. And, when we were there in 2023, when the pro-Palestine march happened in London. So what happened with me and your wife? I was with your wife and Flossie. We were on a boat. We were going down the Thames. And we were getting off. We were going to see the Crown Jewels, I think. We were going to the Tower of London, and we got off, or we docked, and there was no way to avoid it. Like along the whole river, this march was going on. And the guy said to us, like, you've got to get off here because there's nowhere else to get off. And so I think that got us off like literally sort of dead center in it. And we had to walk through the march. And look, to be fair, it was peaceful. There wasn't any, we didn't see any violence. What we did see was the socialists trying to sell their buttons and books, which I thought was hilarious.
That was very funny.
But yeah, when you're in a crowd like that, and I think it was reported it was over 100,000, which I'd say, it was big. It felt big. So if you're in London and you're seeing that protest or you're somewhere around it, there's no way that, you're going to believe this whole 100,000 crap. And all the mainstream media is doing, or the legacy media is doing, is sowing even more seeds of doubt. They're so disingenuous. They lie about everything. They gaslight you. And I mean, they're dying. We know they're dying. Piers Morgan will be out of a job in a few years anyway. I say keep going. Double down, Piers. Keep going.
And what's awesome is what we're seeing in the UK is a reclaiming of their heritage, and there's bad elements to it as well. I'm not a white nationalist. I'm not in that crowd at all, but there is a need for us to have an identity And that identity doesn't have to be based on the color of our skin. That identity, in fact, shouldn't be based on the color of our skin. It should be based on what we believe. And what I'm seeing as I look online is, there's the fringe elements that the mainstream media want to focus on. They want to pretend that it's all about these people. But actually, for a lot of people, it's actually just about reclaiming what it meant to be British. And what it meant was a country that was built on the rule of law, the concept of Rex Lex. The law is king. Everyone is subservient to the law. The idea that the government is a servant and not a master. We call them public servants in the Westminster system, in Western society. We have that name for government employees because of that heritage that we inherited out of England, of this idea that the government is your servant. The Prime Minister is not the top. He's actually the biggest of the ministers, of the people that minister to us, that serve us. These, sort of basic concepts around human rights, and we talked about those earlier with freedom of speech and freedom of association, the right to a fair trial. All of these things, again, these didn't happen by accident. These were the fruit of generations of people, sometimes having to fight civil wars, having to dethrone kings that wanted to become emperors. And, this whole history of humanity led to the development of these ideas. And those ideas are worth protecting and worth standing for. And, a lot of the people that are going to these marches, that's why they're going. That is what they're there for. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing to see. The other thing that we're seeing, which is awesome, is that the Blade Runners have not stopped in the UK. I don't have any video of this, but the Blade Runners, so for those that don't know, this emerged out of a trial, essentially a 15-minute city trial. That's my opinion. They say it's not. But essentially, Oxford City put in a bunch of cameras that would monitor your Oxford City trial was different. The ULEZ zones were in London. In London, Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, put in these cameras to create an ultra low emissions zone. And what that was about was basically, if you had an electric car, you could drive wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted, it was fine. If you had a diesel burning car, like if you were a tradie with a ute, then you couldn't drive into the city past these cameras outside of certain hours, or sometimes not at all, without paying a fee, which is essentially a fine. And it amounted, I think, to about $12 Australian every day that you go in. I think it was, which adds up a lot.
Elitist fucking policy. Yeah.
And they say, oh, well, you should take the tube. Oh, yeah, and bring all my tools on the tube, right? Or not everyone's rich enough to live near the tube. Now, London's pretty good, but not everyone's rich enough, right? Some people live outside of the outskirts of London. So you're dead right. It's this elitist policy. But what happened was ordinary people sprung into action. It was amazing to watch. So some people would go and they would scope out, where are these cameras? And these websites emerged where they would just document the locations of the cameras. And there's no crime in doing that. But then other people would use the information from those websites, and they would go at night and, with hand saws or electric saws or various, spray foam, expanding foam, or various other methods, they would immobilize and disable these cameras. They became known as the Blade Runners. They'd cut the wires or do various things. Yeah. And that is still continuing. There is barely a ULEZ camera, and it expanded into the city of Oxford. It expanded elsewhere as well with their various trials. There's barely a camera left that hasn't been vandalized and had to be replaced. Now, they are being replaced. It's not like the system is falling apart and it's not working. They are replacing them. But there is an ongoing, very, very steady campaign against that. And I think what we're seeing is a rise in protest, which is an important part of democratically expressing your will. But we're also seeing an energetic civil disobedience campaign. And yes, I do classify the vandalism of the ULEZ cameras, etc., as civil disobedience and not as vandalism. I can go into the philosophical reasons why I see the difference there if anyone's interested. But what we're seeing is sort of the active arm and the political persuasive arm are both rising at the same time. And the tolerance of Brits for government misbehavior, I think, has reached an end. And I think we are watching, in combination with all of what's happening in the US with Donald Trump and the change in direction over there, I think we're seeing literally a complete change in direction for Western civilization. And it's literally, we are living in history right now. People will talk about this in the same way that we talk about the sexual revolution in the 1960s.
Well, you've survived another episode and you're still here watching. So at this point, you should probably go and subscribe. And if you don't, you are going to be at the wrath of Spicy Carls. And whilst you're there, empty your pockets, there's a buy us a coffee button, and we'd really appreciate it so that I can show up every day and just make Topher's life an absolute living hell. Much appreciated.